Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our third installment of the Greater Portland Sustainability Education Network Sustainability Symposium series. This is a great opportunity to explore the power of business leaders in the Greater Portland region and beyond. And focusing on our panel title, we're talking about business as a force for good. We had a plan to go with the 50th anniversary of Earth Day to have a call for action. And this was going to be hosted at Portland Community College with, of course, our slogan, Educate, Empower, Engage. But given COVID, we all know these issues around this, that we're transitioning into a series with a variety of webinars that are honoring different themes. And again, today is our business theme. Quick Zoom details here. We're going to have our speakers share, and we're going to have a panel in the beginning, and then two like TED Talk style talks, but the questions, Q&A, that's going to be at the end. So if you can please just use the chat page and enter in any audience questions you might have. We'll have 15 minutes at the end for that. And so I have a few things to offer as opening remarks. My name is Kymm Smith. I'm the interim executive director for GPSEN, as well as a sociology instructor at Portland Community College. And as we go through the program, I'll introduce you to our wonderful speakers today. But do be thinking about what kinds of questions or comments or perhaps ideas you have that you'd like to share with the audience or ask of our speakers. All right, as we move forward, I want to do a very formal land acknowledgement, and being that we're in Multnomah County, I'd like to thank before we start this event by acknowledging that the Greater Portland region rests on the traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of the Chinook, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. The Multnomah is a band of Chinooks that lived in this area, and we thank the descendants of these tribes for being the original stewards and protective of the land since time immemorial. We also acknowledge that Portland, Oregon has the 9th largest urban Native American population in the US, with over 380 federally recognized tribes represented in the urban Portland metropolitan area. We also acknowledge the systemic policies of genocide, relocation, and assimilation that still impact many Indigenous Native American families today. We are honored by the collective work of many Native nations, leaders, and families who are demonstrating resilience, resistance, revitalization, healing, and creativity. We are honored to be guests upon these lands. And we thank our colleagues at Portland State University Indigenous Nations program for crafting this acknowledgement. Very important for all of us as we're thinking about social justice issues within our region. So for those of you who are new to GPSEN, the Greater Portland Sustainability Education Network has been acknowledged as a regional Center of Expertise on Education for Sustainable Development by United Nations University and UNESCO. So we work closely with a lot of UN initiatives and UN partners or international partners around our region and the world. And our goal, our mission, is to really connect people. We're looking for multi-sector collaborations in this broader network so we can multiply our collective impact. And as I said earlier, our motto is educate, empower, and engage. So we want to learn about these issues, but also help people realize how they can make a difference and ways that you can engage for a sustainable future. To learn more about our work, please go to gpsen.org. And specifically, we're working with the Sustainable Development Goals. And within the SDGs, you'll see that there are 17, and there's specifically a series of themes. Across the top, you really have the social goals, and our first sustainability series event was focused on issues of poverty, hunger, health, and education, as well as clean energy. Our second series was focusing more on arts and activism and ways that people are focusing on alternative ways to support social justice and the environment. So I do encourage you to go to gpsen.org and our symposium page. All of the recordings from past events are there. Today, we're going to be focusing on the second row, which are more economic goals. So what is it that folks are doing in our region to advance economic growth in sustainable ways? Thinking about how we can reduce inequalities, but also create systems that support greater well-being and sustainability within our businesses and within our communities. And I really want to thank the speakers today who are doing this work for the advancement of peace and social justice with 16, as well as developing partnerships so we can increase our collaboration and collective impact. So those are the intro comments, and I'm going to just do an intro slide here and hand it off to our incredible panelists. You are all the audience today very, very lucky to learn about how these folks are using business as a force for good, but also how we're connecting purpose with profit in a meaningful way through corporate social responsibility. And Jami Haaning is our moderator for our panel. Kymm Nelson's working with Conscious Capitalism in Portland, as well as a consultant. Holly Braun with Northwest Natural and the Corporate Sustainability Collaborative, always loving learning about them, as well as Mike Mercer, who's here with Be Local PDX, and also a long-term friend, and we've collaborated on many things. So I'm glad that you have created your own consulting firm. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and encourage Jami and the rest of our panelists to turn on your screens and then take it away.
All right, thanks everyone. So like Kymm said, I'm the Corporate Social Responsibility Manager at Lamb Research. I'm also a former GPSEN board member, and I'm really happy to be here today with Mike and Holly and Kymm. I think we'll just jump right into it. So I want to give each panelist a moment to introduce themselves, and since we are kind of talking about the connection of purpose and profit, I think it's important to have each one share a little bit about their own purpose. So if you could start with that, and then I'd also like to hear a little bit about what your organizations are doing and how they're supporting sustainable business in the region and how that connects back to your individual purpose. So if you don't mind, Kymm, I'd love for you to start with the introductions.
Sure, thanks, Jami. Kymm Nelsen here from Conscious Capitalism Portland, and gosh, my purpose, I'll start there and hopefully wrap around everything. You know, my grandson was born 11 years ago, and something really turned on inside of me when he was born, and I realized that, you know, I live by the Iroquois philosophy of 7 generations, and I looked at my grandson and realized that I wanted him to see business as a positive thing. And so much of the story in the world is how evil corporations are and how horrible business is. And the truth is that business has uplifted us out of poverty in so many ways. And as much as there are destructive things, I wanted him to be able to look at the possibility of having a business and being able to create that in a way that is uplifting and sustainable. And so it was really, that was a turning point for me in dedicating myself to this work. And it's been fun. 11 years later, you know, he knows I'm a leader in the chapter, and he's very much involved in, you know, hearing me talk about, well, I don't know if he likes hearing me talk about it, but I do. I'm the co-founder and co-chair of the Conscious Capitalism Portland chapter. Conscious Capitalism is focused on helping people begin to change the narrative about capitalism, that there is a different way we can do capitalism, that capitalism itself isn't evil. The way we approach it needs to be improved. We need a new way of capitalism. And so we're focused on 4 tenets that guide that, and that relates to leadership, purpose, stakeholder orientation, and culture. And together, when we pay attention to those 4 tenets, it can guide us toward a more effective and sustainable way of doing business.
Great, thanks. Yeah. Holly, do you want to go next?
Sure. This is my first virtual any kind of presentation, so this is it's fun. Thank you all for being here. It's provocative, and I appreciate starting with this purpose question. And I think to be like really simple or high level terms, I feel like I need to be about enacting system level change for the greater good. And so in order to do this, you first have to identify what are the systems that you're part of. I actually remember being at camp. I've never said this as part of, I don't think I've said this ever in my life, but I remember being at camp as a kid, and there was a picture on the wall of a crack in the concrete and a little flower coming up and this whole bloom where you're planted. And so what is your system and what is the change that you can bring about within that system? And I recognize that in any organization or any family, that is a system. So Northwest Natural has many systems within it, but it is a system into itself. And as a function of being a business in the Portland community, I am part of the Portland business community. And so Corporate Sustainability Collaborative, I'll talk about that, but that ties into that piece. And then by function of being Northwest Natural, not everyone might know, but is actually a local distribution company. We're often referred to as the gas company, but we make no money on the gas. That's just the throughput. That's just the energy we're supplying. We are really an infrastructure and delivery company. So we're part of a network of national and even Canadian local distribution companies. So that's a network or another system that I recognize I am part of and Northwest Natural is part of. And so I feel like my purpose is within those, how do I help advance that greater good, which in this case is largely in the climate space, and more so in, we're recognizing the fuller scope of sustainability and that it's beyond environmental and all of the people components and the social and environmental justice pieces to that. And so trying to look at a system level and how do you help push the change. So actually really similar, I appreciated what Kymm said in the introduction about multiplying our collective impact. That's what we have to do. I mean, it's just like the challenges are so big that we've got to have some exponential impact here. So to give a little more on each of those groups, so I mentioned 3 systems, but I only am representing 2 groups. So Northwest Natural and Corporate Sustainability Collaborative. Northwest Natural is a 161-year-old company. We have 1,100 employees, so very strong in the, one of the largest employers, I don't know, in the state, in Portland, but a strong employment component to this. 14,000 miles of pipe distribution, so that's a lot of pipe. And we have been historically a leader among our peers, and that not necessarily a leader in the Portland business community. I haven't thought about that as much, but yeah, we probably have, but I would say a leader in this local distribution company. And how do we help gas utilities think about what they could be and decarbonizing the pipeline? And so we've had, long track record, and I won't go through those now, but where we were the first in the nation, but then the nation follows suit to have like a carbon offset program to decouple your rates so that your volumes, your usage of the natural gas and what you get paid are disconnected, so you can actually encourage customers to use less. So those are a couple quick ones. The Corporate Sustainability Collaborative has only been around about 5 years. And this is a group of, it's more than 50, maybe less than 100, but businesses, government entities, and nonprofits. And usually it's a sustainability manager type person, someone who really cares about the environmental component to sustainability, who wants support, wants to share resources. We share best practices, and a lot of it is trying to use what other people have learned so we can accelerate that change and we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. So we're really just this, open platform sharing, and that's actually so energizing to be in a completely competitive free space. And we're really just trying to help each other go faster and further. And then we also pool our resources to host an Earth Month when we're not in COVID times, so that all these organizations can come to the same events and they're hopefully better and stronger, but it's less work on any one organization. I think that answers your first couple questions.
Yes, thank you. All right, Mike.
Well, thanks everybody for participating, and I really appreciate starting with this question, because I think my generation, I don't think we ever talked about purpose and work unless you were going into theology or something early on. So, my career started actually with the YMCA, and I thought it would be a fun job to have, and I make maybe just enough money to do the things that I wanted to do. And But over time, I got involved with early childhood education and raising money for, for making sure that those kind of pre-K programs were available to all kids, and, really began to learn a little bit more about brain development, just how important it was for kids to be successful throughout the rest of their years. And so, that was my first probably connection to where mission really and purpose really became part of my work. And over time, I got more involved with Northwest Earth Institute, where I spent some time both on the board and as a program volunteer, and also on staff, and began to see, you've heard people talking about systems, and that's, the focus was really around behavior change, but seeing yourself as part of this broader system. And rather than looking for somebody else to create change, it was like, what change can I create? What kind of change can I create in my personal life, within, my political activism life and my work life? And so that was, for me, I think was a big kind of step forward into suggesting that, for me, the behavior change and the way that seemed to work the best for me, and I think for a lot of other folks, is when you can align altruism and self-interest. A good example would be just riding my bike every day. I get the health and wellness benefits of that, but I also save a ton of money. And I get to smell chicken pot pies as I'm riding down the road, or, get to be rained on or enjoy the rain in Oregon, or the sunshine when it shows up this time of year as well. But so that purpose thing has been, that's kind of led me to starting to work with B Corps through MMercer Consulting over the last 5 or 6 years, and again seeing that business really is probably one of the best levers for change. And capitalism has been great in so many ways. It's also fallen short and created some of the problems we're trying to solve. And so being a part of that and helping companies be more effective as capital, as drivers of capitalism, I think has been, really something that I've really appreciated and feel like it's where I can best apply my time. So in addition to working with them, Mercer Consulting, also Be Local PDX, which is a collection of about 130 or so B Corps, both in the greater Portland area and throughout the state of Oregon, Southwest Washington. And our work really there is, we're not necessarily a membership organization, but really to support those B Corps, help them connect with one another so that they can look for opportunities for collaboration, support one another, particularly during times like now, during COVID, is like, how do we help each other through this thing rather than each of us having to try to go through it on our own. And then lastly, really is around kind of certification support and helping companies become better at using business as a force for good, both in terms of how we engage with all of our stakeholders as employees, as shareholders, but also as within our communities and also the environment. So Be Local PDX also puts on a variety of different programs which are open to folks outside of the B Corp community. So if you're purpose-driven, either as an individual or as within your business, you want to participate in those programs. We do lunch and learns. We have an annual Build Be Leadership. There's a lot of B's involved in our work, but the B Leadership Development Conference. And then we do a day of service with about 400 employees before where we're all out in the community trying to have a positive impact. And unfortunately, COVID kind of did that under this year. But anyway, so those are some of the things we do, and you can certainly find out more about Be Local PDX through belocalpdx.com, even though we are a nonprofit.
Great, thank you. So I think we'll move on to just talking about the current context of coronavirus and really the world reacting to a lot of the social injustice that we've seen. There's a lot going on, and I'm wondering what you all are seeing, either kind of like broader trends with the businesses that you're working with through organizations or your own companies. How are businesses addressing big issues such as diversity and inclusion and climate change? And has that changed at all with current context? So Mike, would you mind starting?
Sure. So maybe I'll just start with a kind of quick example of a client that I've worked with just recently, went through B Corp certification, and this is really more on the social justice front. So I won't necessarily name the client, but I think they did some really good work, and I was really proud of what they started into. So this is an organization, kind of a tech company, lots of engineers, got through certification largely on their work around energy conservation and the way they treated their employees, and did some really good work in that space. But as we got through the certification, it became pretty clear that they hadn't really, their work on diversity, equity, inclusion really wasn't all that strong. If you just had to look at their staff, it was mostly men, almost all white, run by men. So we got to the end of the certification, and they said, well, okay, so what's next? And so it became pretty clear to me kind of what might be next for you, and you might want to consider doing some more work in the DEI space. And their first response was somewhat typical, was like, well, do we want to just hire folks of color for, to kind of check the box? And we've done that in the past. It hasn't been really successful. And then, so we asked that question to say, okay, where does this alignment happen for you between altruism and self-interest? And so, like, starting with the question of why it's important to kind of think about kind of some of the injustice that's occurred in the past, and the structural racism and that's kept people out of some of those kinds of employment opportunities. And so, that was a starting question for them. And then I started to go, okay, now what's the self-interest reason why you would all want to do this? And, then it's like, well, obviously our employment pools are changing. They're becoming more diverse. If you want the best talent and you want to be active in kind of attracting the best talent, you need to be looking at more than just, white folks that are going to kind of get you there. And then the next piece was, well, what about your clients? The RFPs that you see come through, my guess is they're going to ask you at some point pretty quickly a little bit more about what you're doing in the DEI space. And within a month, I mean, they got the largest client came back with their RFP and said, what are you guys doing in the DEI space? And so they quickly realized they needed to do more work. But I think now that they've been moving along that path, they're clearly seeing the benefits to them, the engagement that their staff are having in this conversation. And they're actually making some real significant change, but they're doing it because of kind of, again, that alignment between self-interest and altruism. So that's maybe one example I just share, and then I'll let other folks, I'm sure, have got other examples with COVID and so forth.
Great, thank you. Kymm, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm going to dive in this a little deeper, because our organization, we're an international organization. We have chapters around the world, and the chapter leaders got together recently and had a real straightforward conversation about the fact that all of the faces on the screen, and there were probably 40 of us in that meeting, were all white. And the racial inequity of that was really stunning, and we as an organization have talked about this before, because oftentimes, similar to what you were saying, Mike, we'd have a conference and the majority of people on the stage would be older white men or younger white men who were in the boys club of the older white men. And we've had challenging conversations about it, but this current situation has brought it to the forefront in a way that I can't imagine it would have happened without COVID. I think COVID put us in a position of getting out of the norm and being able to just ignore the signal that's coming in. And because of the combination of these two events, I think it's brought awareness. And so for us as an organization, we're in a similar place that your client is in, Mike, where we're looking at something has to fundamentally change. And I think it's happening throughout, the conversation is happening. Of course, it all depends on action, right? But it's happening at every level of scale. It's happening individually in our personal lives. It's happening in the way that we are interacting with others around us in our relationships. It's happening in our businesses and the way we do business and the clients that we choose and the vendors we choose. And it's happening in organizations like ours that bring a voice to the community and help to guide the discussions in the community. So I'm perceiving, you know, a significant shift for our chapter, and we're being contemplative about that right now. And we are being mindful that anything we do needs to be conscious. What we're seeing as in our organization and in the conversations we've had with local business owners is the greatest impact has been in stakeholder orientation. That more businesses are recognizing the stakeholders and that less focused on the profit, although, you know, because there hasn't been any profit. So what do you have? Where do you put your energy as a business owner when the money's not there? The only way you can invest in your business is through the people and the relationships and the connections and strengthening the way that you are being nourished and nourishing your community and the environment around you. And so that's one of the core tenets of conscious capitalism. That in our philosophy is the turning point to make capitalism be a positive force in the world. Is that when we start recognizing the interrelationship of all of us, then things will change, because it's, if you hurt one part of the system, you hurt the whole system. We all know that. It's all interrelated. So I think that's been one of the key shifts that I've been seeing among business owners in the conversations we're having, is shifting their perspective to recognizing the power of investing in the community of their stakeholders.
Yeah, so I find that it's actually really interesting that there's been a parallel. I've been at Northwest Natural for 17 years now. So, and actually our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Council has been around for 20 years. But that there's been a parallel in both the work on the sustainability side and on the DEI side, where it starts more grassroots, has some, you know, high level support, but it's just small to start. And it's people with passion and dedication to this topic, because both of these didn't at one point tie directly to profit, or, you know, there were gaps in between. And so it's hard to connect the dots, but some people knew. And so these efforts start kind of small and they're worked on for years, sometimes decades. And then there is an external force that then kind of awakens people to how important this is, and it gets a lot more attention. And so I think it's really fascinating that that's been the trend on the sustainability, like the environmental side of sustainability. And then also I believe that we're seeing it a lot on the social side. So we have had this network. I wasn't actively part of it. I was more on the environmental piece, but now it's kind of, I wouldn't say everyone is part of it, but far more. I mean, this is just, you know, we're all interested. We've got our White Fragility Book Club tomorrow. I don't know if people will be on it. It's remote, but we've had these book clubs all along, but I suspect there's a lot more people signing up for it now. And I appreciate that the framing on it has been looking at our employees and studying to say, what percent of our employees are these, you know, white dudes? What part are women? How many are people of color? And making concerted effort to track those and to recruit and trying to see improvement. And I just saw a stat that we are 100% better than when we started in 2000. And I say better, I should have said diverse, but I think we're saying diverse will be better. And so we still have a ways to go, but 22% of our employees identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. So, I mean, progress, right direction, this is good. But employees are one part, also our purchases. You know, we are spending millions of dollars a year. And so are we being mindful that those are going to minority and women-owned businesses? And we, I think, had a 45% increase this past year. And so tracking, it's that first thing, but then being able to see it improve. And then especially I'd say, and with COVID times in particular, being really mindful that our customers at all economic and diversity aspects have access to our service. And that we discontinued any shutoffs during this COVID time, because recognizing that right now it wouldn't matter quite as much, but when it was cold, it was really important that everyone still has access to their heat. And then I don't know as much about this one, but I know in the partnership category, we're being mindful about the different organizations in our, you know, kind of that stakeholder orientation you were talking about, Kymm, that we're being more mindful about the groups that we partner with. And I think on the employee one, back to what Mike was saying, you know, sometimes it's not just, you know, you put the application out there or the job posting, but you've got to get the posting in the spot where you've got diverse candidates that will see it. Or maybe the diverse candidates didn't have the full qualification list, so you need to go deeper down into that process. And so we actually looked at which of our jobs don't require the advanced schooling, and can we go recruit so that the bar to entry is lower, but that we're making it directly available, because they're good paying jobs, you know, to more diverse people. And so that pilot was happened in 2019. It was quite successful, and 100% of the interns who went through that internship actually got hired on full time. So, you know, they're just steps. I'm not saying this is changing the world, but I appreciate that there is definitely an awareness and an attempt, and there is a lot of focus on trying to do better and to be more representative, and having our employees match our customers. Yeah, and that, you know, where we're spending money matches our customers, and that we're just having more reflective of who we're serving and how we're spending our money and who we're hiring.
Great, thank you. Holly, I think we'll stick with you for this question. I'm curious if you can share a little bit about where you think there's more opportunity to further catalyze action within the regional business community, and then what hope do you have for the future?
Yes, I kind of like it when I don't go first, because then I don't have to exactly answer the question. So this time you might catch me. But so I guess where I feel like there's hope, but it's not just in Portland, but this idea that being part of a local distribution company network in Canada and the US, we have a voice and we are leaders in that space. And so it really doesn't matter at the end of the day if Northwest Natural, which I don't think I said earlier, but we have a goal now to have carbon neutral pipeline by 2050. That happens through renewable natural gas. It happens through renewable hydrogen and mad energy efficiency. You've got to have lots of it. And new technology that makes the efficiency possible. But if Northwest Natural does that, we have not really achieved the goal, because the bigger goal is this climate crisis and having a new way of having business that's also a force for good, that cannot just be isolated to Portland, because the carbon is, you know, all over. And so I've actually just gotten a new role, and it's more in this convening at a bi-national level. So Canadian utilities and North American, I guess it's North American, Canadian and US natural gas utilities, that we are all making this push together. And it's not really all, because you've got, you know, your early adopters or your innovators, your early adopters as you move up that curve, but that we can at least start working with the innovators. And I would say it's pretty similar to the Corporate Sustainability Collaborative, where you have the people that are like, we want to do this. How do we do this? Let's work together, and we can make it move faster, so that when the others come along, you're like, oh, here's the resource, here's the plan. And we're also looking, Europe is a little further ahead of us, maybe more than a little, in decarbonizing their pipelines and their energy system. And so how can we learn from Europe? We're being very proactive in that, so that we can make ourselves go faster also and adopt their policies to the extent it's relevant, but trying to learn what we can from them. So I feel hope in the sense that looking broader than me, than us, than just like my organization. It's like, how do I leverage the system I'm part of to bring about faster that change that we need to see and want to see? And it's actually so much more fun to do the work that way, and more energizing. So I'm encouraged that, to the point of having your altruism and your personal interests align, it's more interesting and it's more effective when you go at it together in this like serious convening. That's not the symbol for convening, by the way. It might be more like that. I don't know. Anyway.
Jami, can I take it next?
Sure. Because
this idea of convening, I think, is huge. I wanted to just let folks know about an amazing collaboration that's happening between a number of key organizations in this space. It's called Imperative 21, and it is a group of organizations that includes Conscious Capitalism, Inc., which is our international organization, B Lab, the B Team, Chief Executives for Corporate Purpose, inclusive capitalism, and just capital. And all of these organizations have gathered together into a coalition to, instead of each of the individual organizations doing their little segment of the story, to come together, and together we're going to find an answer. I think there's been an amazing convergence because of these dynamics that have happened in our world, that we're realizing that we cannot do this alone. None of us can do it alone, both as individuals and as organizations. If we're going to really change the way this system works, it's going to take that level of effort and cooperation and collaboration. And so I feel that at that national level, what was really cool is March 4th was the first convening of that coalition. And it happened to be the same day as our conference, where we, Conscious Capitalism Portland, was bringing together the first collaboration of 11 different organizations in this space. And it was an amazing sort of synchronicity when we found out that because our executive team couldn't come, because they were at that other first time event. And so it was an amazing insight for us to see that we're tracking. I think Portland and Oregon is tracking with that mindset. And I think we can stand as a beacon for this effort and this work as organizations, because we're representing 3 different organizations here that were part of that collaboration, but also as business owners. And we the organization support and bring those conversations in a powerful way. So that's my hope, is that we've turned a corner, and I know there's a lot of work ahead of us, but this was huge. This is a huge shift in the mindset around this work. So I'm really grateful for that.
That's great. Thank you. All right, Mike, you can wrap it up for us.
Okay, well, I like that hope was thrown into, what are we hopeful for in the future? Because I don't know who said this, but I like the term of hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. Oftentimes we think like, oh, I hope things are going to get better, and there's not much action that leads to it. And I think what we're all talking about here is what are the things we can actually do to bring that hope in the vision that we have for the future into fruition, and it's happening. And I think in some ways, like, how do we catalyze action? In some ways, like, just hold on, because it's already happening. Our employees are demanding it of us, and organizations across I think we've seen that on a daily basis, how employees are expecting their employer to operate differently than they have been in the past. I think we've also seen that happen with consumers, and consumers are now demanding business to act, I think, responsibly and differently than they have in the past. So in some ways, I think it's just hanging on to those trends. It's continuing to respond to those, as a business, to make sure that we're paying attention to those things that allow us to be successful in the future, and also really connecting to and listening to the variety of stakeholders that are being asked. And I know not everybody's going to pursue B Corp certification, but I think there are lots of different methods to move forward. I just think any time that you can have some sort of set of metrics that are driving those changes forward, so they're not just a good idea that sounds like fun to pursue, but actually has some real meat to it. I think the other thing we have to be really paying attention to is just trying to avoid greenwashing, which is easy for a lot of our organizations to want to do. I mean, I think we all kind of want to put our best foot forward, but to really make sure that we're being transparent and authentic, and tying our work back to some metrics that folks can say, yep, they're actually doing it. It's true. It's not just something written on a document somewhere. So I would say a lot of it is just, for me, is holding on to those trends that I think have started. I think, Kymm brought up that we've turned a corner, and I actually think, we're more than just at an inflection point. I think we're actually at a turning point. And so I think it's going to be exciting to see where it goes.
All right, thank you so much. We are unfortunately out of time, but I appreciate all of the panelists and everything you shared today. And I will turn it back to Kymm.
You guys are amazing. I'm so grateful for everything you've shared. And of course, what a great quote, hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. So congratulations to all of you. And there is still, we're going to have time at the end with questions, of course. It's with Q&A, and I know there's some in the chat page, so you might want to consider checking those out, panelists. I'm going to go back over and share my screen and introduce our next amazing presenter. So excuse me just a moment here. So in our work, we have been able to have incredible amounts of partnerships that go around our region, and you've been able to identify what that means in private industry, what that means in your nonprofits, within your collaboratives. I'm also we're grateful to have Forrest and Tabatha joining us for the next two sections. And these are, the panel was a 30-minute session. These are 15-minute speakers, like a TED Talk style. And they actually had to, poor things, had to really cut down. They had whole workshops that they were presenting during our symposium when it was face-to-face. So Forrest Resener, he's the communications director with StoveTeam International. So interested. This is such an intriguing title, 400 cigarettes a day, the killer you didn't know existed. Would you kindly share your screen and tell us your story? I know you got a video for us as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kymm. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm glad that we could do this, even if it is just over Zoom. Someday we'll all get together for a convention, but for now, I'm really thrilled to be here for this. I want to start with a video, so I'm going to share my screen here. Just the video kind of gives an overview of the problem that StoveTeam is addressing, because a lot of people don't know about it. So here we go. Oh, the first half of the video is actually made by Nova about the issue of open fire cooking, which is what we address by providing cook stoves. The second half of the video, we'll go straight into it, is StoveTeam's founder, Nancy Hughes, about 3 years ago, talking about how she started StoveTeam, which she started about 12 years ago, and then I'll jump straight in from there. Here we go.
They make this world black. My hands were like grease. You couldn't wash it away.
The pots were black. The air was black. It was impossible for breathing.
We have seen forest reserves in 3 years completely gone, not a single tree standing there.
Three billion people use biomass, so wood, dung, charcoal, agricultural waste, and they cook those on very rudimentary open fires. That smoke kills roughly 2 million people each year, mostly women and children. So that's double the number of people that die from malaria each year.
The most dangerous activity a woman in the developing world can undertake is cooking for her family. And most of them have a baby on the front or a baby on the back. So that baby is inhaling so much smoke, it's equivalent to 3 packs of cigarettes a day.
Cooking on an open fire contributes more black carbon to the atmosphere than all of the cars and the trucks in the world combined.
To make a ton of charcoal, it takes about 10 tons of trees. The forests are just vanishing.
The production and distribution of ultra-clean cook stoves that nearly completely eliminate smoke and reduce fuel consumption.
This new stove, look at this with your eyes. There is less smoke and it uses much less fuel.
The black is gone. I feel healthier, and my children, they are no longer sick.
What's the best way to design a stove to reduce smoke and increase performance? Our goal is to really bring researchers, designers, engineers, business people together. So it takes all of these people all under one umbrella to get the right stove into the hands of women. Normally a stove project, you go down there, it's totally screwed up. The design doesn't work. It uses more than the open fire. I mean, it's just like 1,000 things go wrong.
We're, mentally prepared for corruption. So stuff's going to get just lost, held up, arrive, broken. I reckon everything that can go wrong will go wrong.
The scale is huge. We need to make not just 100 million stoves by 2020, but we have to serve 100 million families. To really serve 100 million families, more like 300 million stoves. I mean, this is off the chart. By manufacturing cook stoves, we're going to save thousands of lives, more than 100 million trees. We're going to create local viable jobs, and we're going to reduce indoor air pollution for millions of women. It's an incredible opportunity. We hope you join us.
Get ready to be moved. Our next speaker has been named a CNN hero and has been awarded the prestigious International Purpose Prize for improving the lives of nearly 500,000 women and children in Latin America. President of StoveTeam International, Nancy Hughes.
Well, in 2001, I lost my husband, a family doctor, to breast cancer. I had to figure out what to do with my life. What do you do? So I joined Rotary, and I volunteered for a medical team in Guatemala. And they asked me, what can you do? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm a mom, So what did they do? They put me in the kitchen. It was horrifying to see what went on there. I mean, we were a team of 120 physicians, nurses, and support personnel. I saw babies who they couldn't intubate them. They couldn't put the tiny tubes down their throats. They were so choked with creosote. Babies died. So I realized what we were doing was really important. So I volunteered again the next year and the next. And on the third year, I was working in the kitchen. I was the head of the kitchen by that time. And what can I say? Anyway, so this young woman named Irma, who was about 18 years old, beautiful, speaking Quechua, came into the kitchen and she said, can you delay dinner? Because I want to thank the team. You see, I fell in an open cooking fire at the age of 2. My hands have been burned shut for 16 years. Your team has opened my hands. I mean, what are you going to do? So we delayed dinner. And I said, okay, this is the stupidest thing I ever heard. People are cooking inside their homes with a campfire? The homes are about the size of my bathroom in the United States. So anyway, I came back and I went to the Rotary Club that I had just joined, and I said, don't you do stuff about things like this? So I hustled 10 of my friends, you all can do that. And I said, okay, let's go to Guatemala and we're going to install stoves. We're going to be called the Stove Team to go along with the medical team. Fine. So these people came with me and I thought we were hot stuff. We put in 120 stoves and I thought, yeah, we've done it. Well, guess what? Then I went home and found out the need in Guatemala alone was for 6 million cook stoves. So I kind of stopped doing that. And then who knew? The leading designer of rocket elbow cook stoves, of which this is one, lived 20 minutes from my home. I didn't know that. He knocked on the door and he said, you can't stop doing what you're doing. And I said, I'm over 60. I can do what I want. He said, what's the matter? And I said, we're putting in these stoves and it's not enough, and they're made of 300-pound pieces of cement. And, Guatemala, it's made up of 24 volcanoes. I said, and that's where people live, is on the sides of the volcanoes. And they can't carry all these heavy pieces up the sides of the volcanoes to put them in their homes. And he said, so what do you want? And I said, I want a portable stove. I want it locally made. I don't want it shipped in from anywhere else. This is where they need employment, is in the poor areas of the world.
So that's where I'll pick up. Nancy was able to do that. The man she was collaborating with is named Larry Winiarski. He took Nancy's ideas and he went down to El Salvador and began a collaboration with a local entrepreneur in El Salvador named Gustavo Peña. Together, the two of them designed the stove that you see here, which is called the Ecocina, and StoveTeam International was formed about 12 years ago, and ever since then we've been building and producing those stoves. But the way that it all happened is more interesting than that. Nancy was not interested in owning a factory, but everyone knew that the next step to get the stoves out was to start a factory to build and distribute the stoves. So what Nancy decided to do is she formed StoveTeam, and what StoveTeam did was help Gustavo to start his own factory. And then they went on to do the same thing in 3 more countries. Today, StoveTeam has 4 successful factories in 4 different countries in Central America: Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Guatemala. Now, this is Marco Tulio, the owner of the factory in Guatemala. Each factory is owned by a local person, and each factory is employing many local people to build and distribute the stoves, and also using local materials, enriching their local economies. This model's actually worked really well, and to date, StoveTeam has distributed over 76,000 stoves. And because the average family size is so large, this has directly benefited over 500,000 people in Central America and saved nearly 1 million tons of CO2 from entering the atmosphere. Here's a little bit about the stove that we produce. It's called the Ecocina, and it was designed, as Nancy wanted, to be built locally using local materials. It's portable, and it's designed specifically to be perfect for cooking traditional Latin American foods, the things that people need to be able to cook. Additionally, it costs only $50 to produce. Each stove, even without a chimney, saves over 86% of the smoke from being emitted into the home, simply because the fire is much hotter. It's a much more efficient design than just a fire. But most of the stoves that our partner factories are producing at this point actually do go out with chimneys. And each stove saves 50% of the wood, so families are having to gather half as much wood. And each stove saves 10.5 tons of CO2 over the course of its life, which is equivalent to half of the carbon emissions for the average American for a year, so 6 months of the average American's carbon emissions. Stoves are also cool to the touch, so there's no danger of burns. I want to back up and cover why stoves are so important again. As we saw in the NOVA video, 3 billion people around the world still cook this way. And that video came out 3 years ago or so. Since then, we've learned that actually 4 million people per year die from causes directly attributed to cooking over open fires inside their homes. In addition to that, 4 million people report burns per year directly from open fires. All of these problems are affecting almost only women and children because they're the ones who are inside the home all day long cooking. And that's where the title of the presentation comes in. 400 cigarettes per day is the amount of smoke that an open fire produces inside of a home. And the amount that every single person inside that home, every member of that family is inhaling is equivalent to 3 packs of cigarettes per day, every day for their life. Now, this smoke mainly causes lung problems, but it also causes heart problems and severe eye problems. And it leads to energy poverty. Families are obviously, these are impoverished families who are cooking this way in the first place, but they're held in an impoverished state, not just because of the health problems that they're experiencing and having to deal with, but also because they're having to collect so much wood. These families are either paying for wood, which is one of their largest economic draws if that's the case, or they're having to forage for wood. And in that case, it often takes 20 hours per week. And in many cases, it falls to the children in the family to collect the wood, in which case that's time when they're not able to get an education. I wanted to give a specific example of someone that our in-field person met a couple weeks ago. This is Flavia in the background here in the blue shirt. Flavia is 72 years old, and she's been carrying this much wood on her head every day or every other day to feed her fire. She spoke to us in a video that's on our website, and she said that the smoke is severely hurting her eyes, and that carrying this much wood is really hard on her neck. In the next 2 weeks, we are going to be providing her with a stove for the first time, which is going to be really exciting. The last reason why stoves are so important is climate change and deforestation. It's kind of funny to think about, because a small campfire inside a house does not seem like it could really compete with industrialized society. But the fact is, so many people around the world cook this way, and it's such a dirty way to cook. It produces not just carbon emissions, of course, but black carbon as well, which is a climate change accelerant. So it really adds up. And also the deforestation factor. If there's a village and everyone is cooking over an open fire, they're using the wood that is closest to the village, and so they're stripping the forests around where they live. And to finish up, I want to get into current events. Normally I would talk about our volunteer trips. We do 3 or 4 volunteer trips every year. Anyone's welcome to come down, work in the factory, build stoves with us for about a week, distribute the stoves to people in need, and also have a lot of fun. But we can't do that right now because of coronavirus, obviously. So the best that I can offer is that we'd love to have you sign up for our waiting list on our website, and we'll let you know once we announce trips for 2021. And then in terms of current events, also right now, 3 of our partner factories are closed due to coronavirus. And so we've been providing emergency food aid for them during this difficult time to make sure that none of the workers or their families have to go hungry. And I think I'm out of time. Is that correct, Kymm?
It's always so hard, isn't it? Wonderful stories. You've shared some great information. Really, really grateful for everything you've shared. And I have put the link to StoveTeam International in the chat page. Great. And as promised to our community, all of the audience members, you'll be receiving a resource page too with the contact information for each of the speakers. So yeah, Forrest, if you want to stop sharing your screen, I'll share mine, and there will be some time. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Some more
Thanks
questions. So inspiring. I really hope that everyone feels at least like, and again, I do really like the idea of, again, hope is a verb. So when we are exploring what we can do on a regional level, always thinking about the international level, again, the Sustainable Development Goals are collective. The United Nations established these 17 goals to achieve by 2030, Agenda 2030. It's very aspirational, but what can we do on the local level, and how each of us, what do we do in our work? What do we do in our businesses? What do we do in our relationships or in our home? So Tabatha Rood is the executive director and founder of BamCashea, and we've met a number of times in addition through, and I want to recognize, of course, these other local organizations, Green Empowerment, Global PDX, Mercy Corps, Medical Teams International, care very deeply about this work. And so again, how do we support, whether it's through our time or our money, or obviously shopping with our dollars. And Tabatha has created this wonderful new, with her team, business around natural resources that have supported Ghana and some work in Africa. Tabatha, would you like to share your screen? And I'll stop sharing mine, and you can unmute yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm very happy to be here as well. I'm going to try to share my PowerPoint here. So yeah, you mentioned BamCashea. It's a hard word to say. It's a made-up word, but it's my organization that I started in 2018, largely as a result of my Peace Corps service in Ghana from 2014 to 2016. I was an agriculture volunteer there, working actually as a Peace Corps Master's International student from University of Washington in their natural resource program. And I worked largely with cashew farmers and women who were collecting shea. So this logo was produced by one of my neighbors who is a graphic designer in Portland, and the 2 smaller trees are based off cashew, and the larger one in the center is shea. And that's largely because shea is native to Bamboy, yet cashew is a huge industry. So I really formed this organization because I kept in touch with a lot of the people that I served with in my community in Bamboy. It's a very diverse town. I spoke 5 languages there, mostly because if if you spoke one or the other, you'd get a different reaction. So I really wanted to help these people in the global context. When I learned about the industries of cashew and the industries of shea, it really blew my mind how little these people get for the work that they do. And so the mission of the organization is elevating the value of natural resources and agricultural post-harvest loss by developing industries where women, farmers, and the ecosystem thrive. And I should mention, I have a day job. I have 4 women on my board who live in various places around the world. And all of them, except for one who's retired, have full-time jobs. So this is very much a passion project. And my day job is in fish and wildlife restoration in the Northwest. And so to me, the ecosystem is what's driving me, my purpose in doing this extra work. In addition to the women and the farmers that I worked with who, you know, do a lot more work than somebody maybe teleworking at home right now, myself included. And I really want to make the world a more equitable place. So just a little bit of context. Ghana is about the same size as Oregon, actually, but it has 27 million people. Their urban areas are growing rapidly, and I'm really happy to follow forest, actually, because a large part of our work is getting larger institutional cook stoves for processing of cashew and shea nuts to reduce the fuel consumption and also the emissions from processing. So the rapid growth of urban centers, obviously most people are still using charcoal and or just firewood for their cooking, processing, you name it. I just added a little note, 186 languages, just so you're not impressed by 5, because it's not very much. So BamCashea focuses on 3 areas. It's cashew, shea, and natural resource management. So the first project I'm going to talk about is the Jami Cashew project. And Jami is the last name of one of my counterparts during Peace Corps, who has spent a lot of his time educating farmers on proper farm practices, including reducing the amount of herbicides that they're using, thinning their trees, and really optimizing their yields. And that's, again, a lot of what my work was as a agriculture Peace Corps volunteer, was working with farmers to explain, you know, cutting down fewer trees actually results in more nuts. So on the left-hand side, you'll see a bucket of cashew apples, which you may have never seen before. Cashew kernels are inside of this larger nut case at the bottom of the apple, and they actually grow 1-to-1. So every time you eat a cashew, there was a almost half-pound fruit attached to that when it was harvested. So our project here is actually using the fruit. I could probably spend 45 minutes explaining to you the processing of a cashew kernel, but the point is farmers don't receive a lot of money for those cashew nuts, the raw cashew kernels, because there's not processing locally for extracting those cashew nuts. It's a very complicated process and also hazardous. There's anacardic acid inside of that shell that burns people's hands. So I'm focusing on the apple, which happens to also have a slew of challenges in that it ferments naturally within 4 hours. So in a place with not such reliable electricity, refrigeration and juicing becomes an issue. So during my Peace Corps service, I worked a lot on jam, making marmalades and jams with cashew. But unfortunately, peanut butter jelly is just not one of the staples in a Ghanaian diet. So it wasn't very successful. Since then, my counterpart and I have been talking about alcohol production, which is not a very popular thing for nonprofits to be involved in. However, my organization is stepping back really as a connector of these people and their projects with organizations that can improve their processing environmentally or capacity to process. So we've just partnered with an African-American man here in Portland who has worked in the hospitality industry for a long time. And this was one of my personal efforts to bring marginalized people together across the world. And so they are starting basically a business to eventually produce cashew brandy. And BamCashea will be there to make sure that the collective in Bomboy is organized and accounted for, and that they receive a majority of the profits from this business, but also improve the fuel efficiency of the processing. So you'll see on the left-hand side, this is a juice press that we had made with stainless steel. Previously, they were using old tin that rusts and is just harmful in the production of juice. So the Cashew project is it's newer than our Shea piece, which I'm going to move into because there's a lot more information. And I should mention that I wrote my master's thesis on Cashew and Shea and the socioeconomic and ecological impacts to Bomboy. So I know quite a bit of information about both of these, but since Shea is native to the region, I really want to focus on how to get more value to Shea. It's not only native, it's also used as a fuel wood source and for charcoal production. So my view is, in order for this tree species to continue to exist in these areas, you need to raise the value locally, not just internationally, which shea butter, as you've probably seen in markets, has become very popular because it's an amazing beauty product. So to the left, you have shea nuts. These are actually shea fruit, and there's a very thin layer of fruit on the outside of the nut. And then to the right, you have the roughly 12 steps to make shea butter. And essentially, I work with a cooperative of 50 women who I was working with them doing village savings and loans, just small savings organization, while I was a Peace Corps volunteer. And they have since collectivized, registered with the Ghanaian Development Agency, and they have a cooperative facility that was donated from the chief of Bomboy, who happens to live in Washington at this point. So we've been working together for a long time, but we've renovated the facility. We've put in a rainwater catchment system for water collection to do a lot of these processing steps. We just installed a mill to help them reduce the time and labor that it takes to crack and crush these nuts at various phases. And we are working to get an oil press that will help them to reduce their costs in making butters and soaps and all kinds of local products. Oh wow, this got a little messed up. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to fix it right now. Deforestation is a huge issue in this area, as has been mentioned. So on the left-hand side is every step of the shea butter processing. But what's really important is the duration, the labor input, and this kind of other information. It's important because it takes a lot to produce this butter. And in the end, women are getting paid practically nothing for shea butter. Meanwhile, the trees are getting cut down and no one really values the tree locally outside of there is traditional cultural attachments to the tree as a sacred tree. But unless there's some economic factor stopping them from cutting it down, it is worth more as firewood than it is as shea butter. So this is the cooperative facility on the left-hand side with the rainwater catchment tank you can see there. These women are cooking over an open fire, as you can see right now. So I'm working right now with the Burn Design Lab to become part of their shea roaster pilot program, but also to design a stove that can be produced locally that is large enough to process shea butter at the scale that they would like. But I included this other chart that says expenditure and income statement, just so you can see how small the profit margins are for shea butter. And then the next time you go to Whole Foods and you see an ounce of shea butter for $20, just think about who's making money in that transaction. It's certainly not the women in Ghana producing this. Sorry, I have this figure here. It's 0.31 Ghana cedis an hour, which is about 5 cents. So it's very, very low margins. And we've started producing soap and body butter. So this is a stamp that we've had made for the Norntoma Cooperative, which means handmade. And they've had some success selling soap locally and also getting into the Ghanaian hospitality industry, soaps in hotels. So in the last 2 years, we have acquired a facility. We have put in a drying platform. We have acquired a mill. We have gotten a meeting space, as in tables, chairs, benches, to process and produce these things. I was there in October for almost a month teaching financial literacy and business skills to a lot of the women of the cooperative. And as you can see on the right-hand side, we are working on marketing and sales of shea butter in Ghana. And that's kind of the most important part, and might change as the cooperative develops and as they want to expand. My mission is to make sure that they are set up to be sustainable in their organizational capacity, but also their processing as much as possible. So the third area is natural resource management. As I mentioned, we're collaborating with design and technology groups to encourage local manufacture. So we have a still being produced for the Cashew project in Ghana. Also, the stove design will be built in Ghana. So it's really that sustainability from a local knowledge to repair and replace parts, and also employment. We have started a native plant garden for fragrances, which happens to be one of the most expensive parts of making beauty products. And also we are exploring mango and moringa oil as secondary ingredients to make it so that our impact on the environment from these new industries is very low. This is Isaac on the right-hand side. He's been working with us for the last 2 years in Ghana as a coordinator for almost all of the programs. But in the next year, we foresee him moving full-time to natural resource management position. I think that it's awesome that you guys opened this whole series with a lot of the issues of racism happening right now. I very much have felt ever since going to the Peace Corps, that kind of white guilt, and it's a good feel. It's a terrible feeling, but it's a good thing to feel because it makes you do things. And I was really shocked by how people live, how people cook, what is valued in our world. And I very much think that by combining the ecosystem with helping women to have money for their children's education and healthcare will only improve our ecosystem over time. So we are encouraging the engagement of Ghanaian Africans with African Americans. We are trying to improve the steps of processing, but ultimately we are empowering industries to start with these agricultural commodities so that the people with the raw resources are receiving and retaining a lot more of the local value. We are all about open information and technology. If you have any ideas that would improve that global marketplace, I would love to hear from you. We just paid a website person to help us make our website look more official and up to date, because I'm also not an IT person. I'm all about the grassroots movement and how I can do as much as possible with as little as possible to get projects on the ground in Ghana. But thank you for your time, and I just really appreciate being a part of this.
Thank you so much, Tabatha. That's actually, I mean, it was this constant learning this whole time. I'm like seriously taking notes on everybody. You guys are, I'm a sociology professor. I'm also just completely engaged and listening and learning from all of you. So I'm going to share my screen one more time because we have our question and answer time now. And I hope that everybody, I know that some folks have, sadly, you know, some people always need to move on, but if everybody can engage during our chat page section here, I want to, actually, I need to get over here so I can see it. There are a variety of questions, and one of the things that shows up for us is how we can, again, continue to change the world. And so if all of the panelists, Forrest, if you all can actually unmute yourselves, we're going to have a set of questions. And in the chat page, that's one of the things that I want to actually be looking at as well. So if you are able to see those. And it's interesting because, of course, things have changed, right? Like we have gone through a different set of questions since our planned symposium. We are obviously in these broader questions about diversity and inclusion, and yet the questions are also on the chat page about systems change, about climate change. And as those were coming in, Forrest and Tabatha also tried to tell some very important, poignant stories on the local level. Maybe the panelists could respond to what Forrest and Tabatha shared. I think that might be interesting. Would that be okay? Like, what was a big takeaway? Or Jami, you hadn't had a chance to even share what your own hope for the future is. Perhaps, did you see something in terms of the lessons from your panel, in terms of what you think is the role of business in a changing world?
Sure. I mean, I think businesses are realizing their role is to be much more responsible and proactive than perhaps they were in the past. And I think, Mike pointed out that we have employees calling for it, we have consumers calling for it, we have investors calling for it. And I think COVID-19 has just intensified that that need and people's expectations around corporate behavior. And, I was kind of looking through these other questions here, and I don't think companies are going to be backing down. If anything, I think they're going to be doubling down on a lot of this stuff. And that's not all of them. I mean, I know there's bad actors out there that we've already heard stories of, but, I think in general, companies realize that there's a vulnerability and there's some real risk to not responding, and whether that be to social justice issues or climate change. I think we're seeing a lot of companies step up and really own their part and really try to proactively address it. So, I'm feeling really hopeful about all of that, and that, at first I was a little bit worried that with COVID-19 and all that was going on, that companies would get distracted and, climate change would fall to the bottom of the list again. But I'm really not seeing that. And so that definitely gives me a lot of hope.
I don't know how many of you are even paying attention to this. Last week and this week is the United Nations high-level political forums, global political forums virtually, focusing on the Sustainable Development Goals. And all of these questions are showing up. And there's lots of details on this, whether it's COVID, social justice, DEI, individual businesses, but how you measure the Sustainable Development Goals. Like Mike, I know that B Local or B Corps are now using the SDGs as a measurement tool. Anyway, these last 2 weeks are actually globally, people are asking these questions, and there might be some opportunities there for all of you. Sorry, Mike, I think you were speaking.
I was just going to add on to, I think, what Jami was talking about, and then also I noticed Mark Simpson had asked a question around, moving to carbon neutral or net zero emissions, and our companies still committed to doing that. And just before I was, I guess, a couple of points of progress, or at least opportunity looking forward. I was just listening to a podcast with the folks, the CEO with Danone, which is a French-owned, that's yogurt and dairy products and a variety of other subsidiaries within that large multinational. And they've just come out with a $2 billion commitment to move towards net zero emissions, I think now by 2025. And again, it aligns both with self-interest and altruism. Say, hey, we got a problem that we got to solve, but we also recognize that if we don't solve this, our food system, what we depend on, is going to be severely jeopardized. That's one, and I know other B Corps this last year, I think over 700 of the 3,200 B Corps committed to net zero emissions by 2030. And my guess is within the next year or two, as they revamp the standards for B Corp certification is they don't usually do anything too prescriptive outside of changing your governing documents, but it sounds like they're going to move towards requiring B Corps to demonstrate what their climate commitments are and have a clear climate commitment, and then taking action toward fulfilling that. So I think within the B Corp movement, I know that it's certainly there, and it's becoming more prevalent on a daily basis. And obviously we can kind of tie this back to not only the environmental impacts, but certainly to kind of the negative impacts on disadvantaged communities throughout our cities and really throughout the world. But so I tend to be pretty optimistic about what I'm seeing on that front. Again, consumers, employees, everybody are holding those businesses accountable. So I don't think it's not like we've seen in the past where I think folks are going to be able to say one thing and then not follow through. I think they're going to be there's just too much transparency out there to not allow that to occur, or to allow that to occur going forward.
Yeah, a scale of transparency and also technological interconnectedness. Obviously, you know, even if we'd been at PCC Cascade having the panel discussions and the TED Talks, you know, we wouldn't have had all the other people who are joining us today, right? There's a lot of people here from different places, and we can share this recording with others. And what does that mean for us to have a sense of interrelatedness? I think, Kymm, you were sharing that too, like we're all interconnected. So do others have some thoughts, reflections?
I've got something. You had asked a question about reflections on what Forrest and Tabatha shared. And it strikes me that it really addresses the first two questions on your list, Kymm. Both of those are examples to me of how deeply intertwined purpose is with creating business that transforms the way that we interact with the world. So we ask, what's the role of business in changing the world? It's the individuals like Forrest and Tabatha taking action on the purpose that comes from within them and creating businesses. And in both of those examples, the change occurred not just from the purpose and the passion of the individual, but through enacting a business solution that brought an answer, that brought employment, that brought revenue, that generates economies where people live in a way that makes their world better. And I think that's where business plays a vital role in the sustainability goals, and making sure that we create a world where people aren't just living in a healthy environment, which obviously is critical, but that they have a lifestyle and a way to generate revenue so that they can have education, so that they can have decent homes, that they can have a lifestyle that is fulfilling for them. So I think that's the role of business in a sustainable future, is to do that in a way that uplifts humanity.
That's beautiful. Forrest, Tabatha, do you want to respond to that?
I would absolutely agree. I think we've seen that happen at StoveTeam. The thing that the first question made me think of is how well it's worked for StoveTeam to rather than Nancy Hughes owning 4 factories and StoveTeam as an organization owning these factories and running them the way that we think they should be run. It's worked so much better to have local people running the factories because they understand, where they live. They understand what people want and how to market the stoves, and then they're also enriching their own economies, and so it's made it much more sustainable, I think, and effective as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kymm. I would just add, I didn't really want, when I started this, I didn't want to encourage business at first, but then it quickly became the only answer. And really to empower them, it is me just being like a bird on their shoulder of like, here's what's possible, here's what exists in the world. And this is the resource that you guys have. So empowering them to value their own resource, because it's not like they're not in the business world. They're just way at the bottom of the chain. So I think that it's an extremely powerful tool. And more to the point, connecting them with the development agency in Ghana hasn't been as impactful for their success as creating a marketable product. So that's been a huge learning lesson for me, and I'm very glad to be helping them learn these business skills that they have been a part of but not in control of, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And Tabatha, I know what shea butter is. I can't believe I mispronounced it. BamCashea. Now I understand. Bam Oregano, cashew.
No, that's okay.
But the idea
there are members of my board who can't pronounce it, so don't worry.
It's perfect. Now we understand. And to even understand, like, I can eat a cashew now and I'll have a relationship with the whole production consumption cycle, right? Like you explained how it comes from this apple, right? And what can we also do with those other products? So I think that under the SDGs, I think that's goal 12 is like, how do we think about production and consumption? And you clearly are helping with that. And again, many of you, and Holly, you know, connecting Northwest Natural and how much you're trying to achieve these incredible goals to be carbon neutral as well. And I know that when we did our Bridging for Sustainability events with our research and curriculum committee, we were talking with PGE, we've been talking with divestment groups with students, like lots of people are asking about carbon neutral efforts. And so yes, we need to acknowledge that important question came in the chat. And so we are actually at our time. There's much more to talk about. I will leave this open. I'm going to do our final slides. I'll leave it open for a few more minutes if anybody has additional questions for our speakers. And I know there's more. So one of the things that we want to acknowledge is that if you have some more information, if you need more information from our speakers, we have their emails here, but we will also be following up with everybody who registered. We'll get a symposium recording to you as well as the speaker resources. So there will be links. Perhaps you'd like to invest in buying a stove. I mean, it seems like Forrest, you and Tabatha could probably create stoves together, right? There's obviously some pieces here, but also, you know, what can we do on a local level? If you are part of a business and you'd like to be part of any of this work or want to learn resources from Conscious Capitalism, the Corporate Sustainability Collaborative, I just promise that if we can get a little bit more of the links, or if you have particular questions as the audience, we'll get that included into a public document that we will share on our GPSEN.org page. So I want to thank all of our presenters, everyone who helped make our Sustainability Symposium series possible. We've had a number of media sponsors and obviously with Portland Community College. If you would like to donate to GPSEN.org, our symposium was actually our largest, it's the only big fundraiser we do a year. So we're offering these for free, but we'd love to be able to continue to increase our impact. So again, educate, empower, engage. What does it mean to have the knowledge that you're gaining from these sessions and that you can feel like you can actually make a difference and that there's clarity in ways that you can participate either locally in your own businesses, in your own lives, or regionally or internationally. So we will be also having a link to an evaluation if you have any more feedback, in addition to potential topics for other sessions in the future. Please do also, you can share questions, but do know we have a regional hub. If you want to share resources, news, events, we really want to cross-promote everything that's happening. This is the only shared calendar that we have now around our greater Portland region. I want to thank the webmasters and the folks who've been supporting that effort. If you want to get involved, we can also, you're encouraged to be a part of committees and just being on the listserv, knowing what's happening. So big, big gratitude to our speakers. I really hope you can do a little round of applause to each other. Very huge. Yay. And that we are at our time. And so thank you for joining us. If you want to stay on, I'm going to stop the recording and I'll just stay on for a few more minutes. And if any of the speakers want to stay or any of the specific guests, you're welcome to ask questions.